Aloha class, I wanted to do a video on exercise 3-7, contrast ABC and conventional product costs. Kunkel Company makes two products and uses a conventional costing system in which a single plant-wide predetermined overhead rate is computed based on direct labor hours. Data for the two products for the upcoming year follow. So their allocation base is direct labor hours, and they're using conventional costing with one predetermined overhead rate. There's some information here. These products are customized to some degree for specific customers. The company's manufacturing overhead for the year is expected to be $336,000. Using the company's conventional costing, compute their unit product cost for the two products. And so they give me this information, and I've just filled it in. This was given in the problem. And so this was given, and I just typed it over here. And then, so we're asking for unit product costs. So you need, for product costs, you need direct materials per unit, direct labor per unit, and manufacturing overhead per unit, which is applied. And so I need to figure out this manufacturing overhead per unit to complete the problem. And so we need to find that manufacturing overhead per unit based on predetermined overhead rate. And so I need a total, to do predetermined overhead rate, I need total estimated overhead cost for the period, which they told me was $336,000. Total allocation base, they use direct labor hours, but they said that direct labor hours is on a per unit basis right here. So they only gave it to me on a per unit basis, and I know how many units they're producing. So I have to convert this to total direct labor hours for all the products, right? So everything they're going to need for both products for the whole entire period. And so we will times this to get a total. So they're going to need 2,000 hours for Mercon, and they're going to need 40,000. Oh, and these are hours. These are not dollars. Let's make sure these are not dollars. And these are direct labor hours. These are not hours. Here we go. So they're going to need 40,000 units, and this is the direct labor hours per unit. Right? And so they need 12,000 hours in total. That will become my allocation base, or 12,000 direct labor hours. And so my predetermined overhead rate would be $336 divided by 12,000 hours. So we have $28 per direct labor hour, right? So that's for every direct labor hour we're using, it's gonna cost us $28. But our product on a per unit basis only uses 0.2 direct labor hours. And so in order to calculate my manufacturing overhead per unit, it's every hour I use is $28. Every hour of direct labor hours gives me $28, and that's how we allocate manufacturing overhead. So we'll times this by how many hours we need for the Mercon, and we only need 0.2 hours, so only a portion of the $28. We only need 0.25 for the Workon, times it by a predetermined overhead rate. So remember, applying overhead, you can times it by your predetermined overhead rate, times it by actual activity or expected activity, and then we can get our unit product cost. And so they're pretty similar. Unit product costs for the Mercon and Workon, and that would be your answer for conventional product costs. Unit product costs per unit, yep. And so let's go on to part 2. Management's considering activity-based costing system in which half of the overhead would continue to be allocated on the basis of direct labor hours. So we're still going to use direct labor hours as an allocation base, but also we have engineering design time. So activity-based costing, we have multiple activity rates, and so we have 2 activity rates here. They told us that engineering would be 4,000 Workon, 4,000 Workon, and then 8,000 hours in total. And then they said half of the overhead would be based on engineering design time. So we said 336, let's do half of that. Half of the overhead would be based on direct labor hours. So now we've divided it between our cost buckets, and same thing from before, we're using 2,000 direct labor hours in total for Mercon, 10,000 for Workon. So just like you see in your textbook, the first step is to have this information, and they're your 2 products. And so now we have our estimated overhead divided by total expected activity equals an activity rate. So total divided by total, now we have 2 activity rates, total divided by total. Now we have 2 activity rates. Next step, after we have activity rates calculated here, Engineering will have a specific activity rate and direct labor hours specific activity rate. We'll times it by the expected activity for product 1, expected activity for product 2, and divide out our manufacturing overhead in total. And so I just referred to these cells over here. I moved them down. This is our activity rate for engineering and direct labor hours. And I need 4,000 engineering design time, times it by our activity rate, 2,000 direct labor hours in total, times it by our direct labor hours rate, activity rate, 4,000 work-on hours, times it by activity rate, 10,000 work-on direct labor hours, times it by $14. So now we have our total manufacturing overhead using two costs, two activity buckets, and we'll sum these up in total. So I'm going to need overhead of $112,000 for all of my products for Mercon and $224,000 for all of my products for Workon, but I do need it on a per unit basis, so this would be manufacturing overhead per unit. So we can divide over here, total divided by number of units, and just move that formula over. So there's a lot more overhead incurred for our Mercon as opposed to our Workon. And then I'm referring, so same exact as before. Oh, did I change that? Direct materials, direct labor is exactly the same, but now we're just allocating manufacturing overhead differently. I've just referred over here to bring it over. Oh, sorry. This one is this one, and this one is that one. So I brought in my manufacturing overhead, and now my product costs have changed a little bit. So before they seemed about even, but now the Mercon is a much larger unit product cost than the Workon, right? And so activity-based costing makes our cost tracking more accurate. It's more complex because we have to calculate more activity rates, but it makes it more accurate. And oftentimes costs will shift from high volume products. So we were making 40,000 Workons, so it'll shift from Workons to Mercons. And so because we can't track them very closely and we think that these products, there's so many of them, we assign a lot of overhead to these products. With activity-based costing, it usually shifts product or manufacturing overhead costs from high volume products to low volume products. And so we're only making 10,000, but these 10,000 are more expensive. They have more overhead. And so that's your answer for number. Explain why the product costs differ between the two systems. This is more accurate, and oftentimes when you use activity-based costing, it shifts from high volume products to low volume products overhead costs. And so in reality, the Mercon is using more overhead and is more expensive.